So we are going to wrap up this chapter today with the percent proportion, which sounds like a really big deal, but it's not all that different from what we've been doing. And there's a formula and there's steps that work every single time. So if you need to know this, this is chapter 2, lesson 8, if you're looking anything up online or in your book. A lot of these can be done as equivalent fractions. So let's take a second and step back to what a fraction is. You can think of a fraction as a part out of the whole. So if I'm talking about the percent of kids that wore a scarf to school today because it was supposed to be a little bit colder, I could say, well, what part of the class wore the scarf out of the whole entire class? So let's say, I don't know, I'll make up some numbers. 5 kids wore a scarf out of a class of 25. So my fraction would be 5/25. One of the ways that you can change that to a percent is by division and do the conversions that we've worked on this whole chapter. Or you can use this handy dandy formula. Now, the book, sometimes it presents it to you like this, sometimes it doesn't. This will pop up in 7th grade with some more sophisticated problems. So I figured I'd show it to you right now because it still applies and it's easy and it's fantastic. So you might need to walk around and chant this to yourself about 100 times. Your parents and your family and your dog will probably look at you like you've lost your mind. It's okay. Keep going. We do this all the time. So it goes percent over 100 equals is over of. Percent over 100 equals is over of. One more time. Percent over 100 equals is over of. That will never change. The only thing I can say, sometimes the 7th grade book flips them so that is over of comes first. It's okay to do it this way. All right, so let's jump right into some problems and I will show you how to set these up. 100 will always be 100 and it will always be on the bottom. The other 3 are what will change. Now, 2 of these will be filled in and 1 will be left blank. That's the one we're trying to find out. Okay, so let's look at our first problem. 10 is 25% of what number? Now, I teach my kids to chunk these or to circle them up, okay? So we're going to circle 10 is, we're going to circle 25%. Sorry, I was sloppy on that one. And we're going to circle of what number? Now, let's set up the structure of our formula. I call this line equals line. It's really 2 fraction bars with an equal sign in the middle. I can fill in the 100 right away because that will always be on the bottom and it will always be 100. Then I can start filling things in. I think the easiest thing to fill in is the percent because it's got a percent sign with it. So I see here I have the 25% with the sign. When I go to my formula, the percent is above the 100. Fancy that, percents of 100. They always seem to go together. So I'm going to put 25 on top of the 100. I'm going to get rid of the percent sign. I don't really need it. Now, I've got a 10 and I've got a missing number. Since the 10 is with the is and the is on the top, I'm going to put my 10 on the top. Now, I told you that we were going to have something missing, and we do. I don't have any more numbers in my problem. It says of what number? I don't know what number, so put your question mark there. Or if you want to get fancy, put a variable like X or Y or M for Melachowski, whatever you want. Now, there are 2 ways to solve this problem. You can think about equivalent fractions. You can think about something called cross multiplication. I want to show you the equivalent fractions or like simplifying because these are problems you can do without a calculator. Now, if I think about the fraction 25 over 100, that can simplify, right? Like quarters and a dollar. This will actually simplify down to 1/4. Well, this is super easy. How do I get from 1 to 10? I multiply by 10. And if I do that on the top, I also have to do it on the bottom. Well, what's 4 times 10? 40. So if I think about the class with the scarves again, this would mean that 10 kids in my class came to school wearing a scarf, and the whole class had 40 kids in it. Does that feel like 25%? 1 out of 4 or 10 out of 40? Yeah, not bad. Now, I talked about something called the cross multiply. Some of you might know it as the butterfly method. Math teachers everywhere just cringed when I said that, but it works. Cross multiply means that you're going to find the diagonal that has 2 numbers. In this case, 10 and 100, right? Because if I went the other diagonal, that doesn't have 2 numbers right now. So I'm going to multiply this diagonal. 10 times 100 is 1,000. And then I'm going to divide by the other number. And I'm totally okay if you reach for a calculator for this. When the numbers work nicely and you can do equivalent fractions, this is way faster. But the numbers don't always work nicely. We know that. This will always work, whether the numbers are nice or not so friendly. All right? And if you were to do 1,000 divided by 25, you'll still get 40 for your answer. Okay, let's go to our second example. 60 is 20% of what number? All right, so here's our steps. Line equals line, set it up, put our 100 on the bottom. Let's go through and chunk. 60 is, it's usually a number and a word. 20%, or in this case, a number and a symbol. And then of what number? Sometimes you'll just see it of what, and they won't say of what number. All right, I like to place the percents first because it's easy to see. My percent is 20%, and in my formula, the percent goes with the 100. So I'll put 20 over 100. The only other number that I have is 60. 60 went with the word is was on top. So I'll put 60 on top. Now I don't have any more numbers. So I'll put a variable. Whatever letter you'd like. Question mark if you want. Doesn't matter. This is an easy one to do with equivalent fractions. How can I get from 20 to 60? Times 3. So I'll do the same thing on the bottom. What's 100 times 3? The what number that's missing is 300. It's like if I talked about just the 6th grade, maybe Blue Corps. 20 kids out of 100 on Blue Corps were wearing sneakers when I talked to them. So if I took that to the whole Blue Corps and all the other grades, that's about 300 kids. We'd expect about 60 of them to be wearing sneakers if those numbers held true. Okay, let me show you how to do this cross multiply again, because I know for some of you this is the first time that you're seeing this. So we have our same formula set up. 20 over 100 equals 60 over m. Remember that I'm looking for the diagonal that has both numbers. So in this case, it's going to be the 100 and the 60. Because if I went the other way, that diagonal doesn't have both numbers. Let me see if I can do that in a different color so that you can see the diagonals and what I'm talking about. See how the one that I circled in black has double numbers, and the one that I circled in red doesn't have double numbers, it only has one? We don't want the red, we want the black. So I'll do multiply, because remember this kind of looks like an X, 100 times 60, that's 6,000, and then I'm going to divide by 20. Now, do not do both methods for every problem. That's a waste of your time. If you can do this, do it. If this doesn't make sense to you, do this. Pick one and stick with it. Okay, our next example. 225 is 75% of what number? Set it up. Line equals line. 100 on the bottom. Let's chunk it up. 225 is 75% of what number? Where am I going to put my percent? That's right, on top of the 100, 75. The only other number I have is. That goes on the top. And then we pick our letter. I don't know, T. I'm not going to try to do the equivalent fraction one for this. I'm just going to do the cross multiply, the butterfly, the X. If you like colored pens and pencils, pull them out for this. This is a good one. So I'm going to do 100 times 225 divided by the other number. And I'm going to reach for my calculator. 22500 divide 75 equals, and I get 300. So T, or my missing number, is 300. Now let's think about this. If I was to put 300 up here, 225 is a pretty good chunk, most of 300. That feels reasonable. It's not like I said 225 is most of 8. That would feel ridiculous. But this seems to make sense. One more. Line equals line. 100 on the bottom. 15 is 30% of what number? Percent goes with the 100. Is goes on the top. And I don't know goes on the bottom. If you don't like switching letters, pick X. It doesn't matter. Do you think we can do equivalent fractions for this? If you look at 30 and 15, do you think that we could do equivalent fractions easily? I think so. If I divide this by 2, yeah, you can divide also. Think about the clock. You've got 30 minutes, and you cut it in half, and then you've got 15 minutes. So I'll do the same thing on the bottom as my pen runs out. There we go. 100 divided by 2 is 50. So my answer is 50. If you wanted to butterfly this, 100 times 15, and then divide by the other number. Okay, I have some steps for you if you want to take a screenshot of this, or if you just want to pause the video while you're doing your work. All right, so here's our formula. Walk around and chant it. If you'd like to create a dance for it, feel free. Percent over 100 equals is over of. Now, if you noticed, all of our problems, all of our forms were the same order. We were always looking for the of what number. In 7th grade, that changes. The formula doesn't change, but the information that we're given does change. So it's worth it to memorize this. Okay, step 1, set up your line equals line. Step 2, put the 100 on the bottom. Step 3, fill in the numbers that you know. 1 will be blank, always. And step 4, to calculate. You can either do it with equal fractions, or you can cross multiply and divide. That's my really bad drawing of a butterfly. All right, I will leave this up for a minute. You can pause the video or take a screenshot.